You're listening to the Physics Ed Podcast. For hundreds of ideas, free experiments and more, go to physicseducation.com.au. And now, here's your host, Ben Newsome.
Becoming a changemaker in your classroom and school is something we all wish to be as teachers. In this interview, I catch up with two brilliant educators, Maddie Scott-Jones and Louka Parry from the phenomenally successful Education Changemakers team. This is a team that works with schools in multiple countries to help teachers become the edupreneurs that drive classroom innovation. Look, these guys hail from Melbourne, but they're constantly on the go, and luckily enough we were able to grab Maddie and Louka just for a short time to have them share their insights on Indigenous science education, why getting messy in class is not a bad thing. Let's be honest, it's not a bad thing. Plus, why modelling failure can be just one of the key things that can drive classroom success. Look, for the Education Changemakers, it's all about getting things done.
This is the Physics Ed Podcast.
G'day and welcome again to another Physics Ed podcast. My name is Ben Newsome from Physics Education, and look, I'm really excited this week to introduce you to two of our friends from the Education Changemakers. This team works so hard to work with teachers not only in Australia, but all over the globe, and their job is to drive innovation in school leadership and learning design. Our friends this week very much are Maddie and Louka, and they bring a bucket load of experience to the table, and I thought you'd like to know just a little bit about them. And they'll help frame why we chat about what we chat about and why they think the way they do. So, look, firstly, Maddie is the Director of Communities at the Education Changemakers. There she's built a global network of 1,000 teachers who are incredibly passionate and really driven in their own schools. She works with many early career educators to support their best teaching practice. She practices what she preaches. Before she was the Education Changemakers, in her own previous teaching, she created, change in her school where children were able to learn to embrace failure, and that does come up in this chat, as well as increase their own ability to have some resilience in entrepreneurial journey, which is quite interesting. So that gave her a chance to become a judge at the National Science Talent Search. She's spoken at many conferences all over Australia, and in her time as a teacher, she was able to support her own students to win the National Maths Talent Quest. You'll also meet with Louka. He is the Director of Programs at Education Changemakers. He's quite a talented individual because, this man, he knows 5 languages, like fluently knows 5 languages, and he was promoted to being a principal at only 27 years old. He was named as a South Australian Inspirational Public Secondary Teacher of the Year even. Look, Louka has spoken with a whole bunch of audiences all over Australia, and that's including the Federal Treasury, at the Embed conference, leading educators across the planet, Education We Want, and Microsoft, and more. So you're going to get a lot out of this interview, and I hope you enjoy it.
You're listening to the Physics Ed Podcast. Why don't you book us for a science show or workshop in your school? We love seeing students get excited about science, and you will too. Go to physicseducation.com.au and click on Schools for more info.
So, Maddie and Louka, welcome to the Physics Ed Podcast.
Great. Thanks for having us.
I'm really happy to have you guys around. I mean, you've been running around, not even just in your local state or country, you fly around the world doing stuff. I mean, could you give, I guess, the listeners a bit of an idea of what is it that you actually do?
Currently, Maddie and I are both, working for Education Changemakers, and it's an organisation that tries to support teacher-led innovation. We believe that most teachers get it. They know that education needs to shift as we see really rapid shifts in the economy and lots of disruption throughout society. But what we're not often equipped with is the kind of the how-to process. So that's what EC does, is basically travel around the globe and support great teachers, great educators to try to make them even more effective in their roles, to make more impact, to really transform learning communities for students, but also for staff and more broader than that. So even just today, we've got our 2 co-founders, Dave and Aaron. They're over in the Middle East, working with school leaders from across the Middle East and Africa. And, we're heading over to Adelaide tomorrow. We're over in Sydney next week, over your way. So it's really exciting work because we get to work with what are foundationally really good people, and that is teachers. People that really care about the learning of their kids.
Yeah, and I've met some of these motivated teachers. Motivated is like an understatement. Some of the people that you work with. I mean, last year at EC Week, isn't it? The big gathering in Melbourne that we had, and some of the people had phenomenal ideas around all types of ways of engaging their kids in school and their communities. It's unreal. Got an exciting job.
Yeah, look, we are really, really lucky. I mean, build capacity in others. We're still teachers, we're educators, really. It's just helping people to take that next step wherever they may be in their leadership or in their teaching or in their how comfortable they are with innovation, whatever it might be.
You can see this coming through too. Like, yeah, as you said, you both are still, you're teachers, you're just going from school to school, place to place. And so I guess I kind of looking at this, I mean, this is a science education podcast. I know you guys do a lot of teaching lots of different ways. And like, for example, Maddie, you trained as a high school teacher. When did you start this sort of thing?
Start teaching?
Yeah, so start teaching. What got you into this type of stuff?
I actually started off studying medicine when I was back living in New Zealand at Auckland University. And to be honest, I think one of the things that made me dislike medicine so much were the people that I was studying with. There was this incredibly sort of competitive atmosphere amongst the cohort. And I was just sitting in a lecture theatre one day looking around and had the realisation that I didn't necessarily want to be spending the rest of my professional life with my peers, and decided to switch out of medicine and move into studying biology and psychology with a view to trying out teaching. And I thought, I might do it for a year or two, and then I'll head back over and study clinical psychology. But I just fell in love with education, and haven't looked back since. I've been in Melbourne now for 7 years, and I can't imagine doing anything other than education, to be honest.
Yeah, we often joke with our educators that we've broken you. You can never go back.
Absolutely.
Louka, where did you come from? What got you into teaching?
So I sort of grew up in the bustling metropolis of Adelaide, and I was quite lucky. My family moved overseas just as I finished high school. And I was one of those kids that, I was kind of jack of all trades, but master of none. I was kind of did a whole range of different subjects and was engaged in a whole range of different ways. But traveling through Europe and living overseas for a couple of years, it changes you. And I came back really thinking I want to make a significant contribution to the world. I wanted to be a salesman for a little while, be a real estate agent. But I had, like Maddie, had another realization that I never want to have to sell something I don't believe in. And I think in education, we are all in sales, but what we're selling is ultimately, a brighter future for the people that we serve, for the young people that we work with, for our colleagues, for our communities. So I came back from overseas, kind of slightly changed, and studied education, and ended up actually one of the most remote communities in Australia, in a place called Mimili, which is on the Anangu Pitjantjatjara Yankunytjatjara lands, the APY lands for short. And that's a 15-hour drive from my front door in Adelaide. So in many respects, it was like being overseas. It's a different language, a different culture, driving into a community of 300 people, and for the first time in my life, I was in the minority. I looked different. I had different skin color because this was an Anangu community, an Aboriginal community. And so I stayed there for 5.5 years in total, which is really important. And some of the averages around how long teachers stay in remote and challenging communities are pretty atrocious for a whole range of factors. It's about 7 months. It's what the data used to be in the territory in particular. So again, that was another transformative process, and we did some really great work. We had a great team there. I became the principal after 4 years as well, which wasn't the initial plan, but I learned the local languages as well, Pitjantjatjara, Yankunytjatjara, and obviously a lot of my work now as an educator is informed by that journey.
There's one of the things I was really excited about getting you guys on this podcast, because clearly everyone can hear this. Luca's very much a languages expert. I mean, you're multilingual to well beyond what I'd be able to do. Maddie, you've very much been heavily involved in science in lots of ways. And think about what happens in a classroom, whether it's a high school science lab or a primary lab. It's regardless, it's still language based no matter what. And just getting your perspectives about how teaching science is very much a narrative, and how we can get it across to kids who really are just disconnected with that narrative, how that goes. I mean, what have you seen happen with, I'm curious from both of you as to what trials, tribulations and in-betweens have you had trying to get kids to just understand what's going on in their world?
Well, I might go first, mate. When I walked into, Mimili School as a middle school teacher, and I was a teacher of everything then. I taught numeracy, mathematics, and even science, and I wasn't a science-trained person necessarily. It became very clear to me that unless this is engaging and actually taps into the current realities of the kids here, the audience, they are not going to engage. So I learned to become a very engaging teacher very quickly. And I did that really by saying, well, what matters to these kids? What's the hook of the lesson here? How does this attach to their world? And I would use every trick in the book. I'd pull out the guitar. We'd look at clips online. We'd make sure that everything was really as interactive as possible, using technology as well, which is another passion of mine. And that's kind of how I've figured this. That's how I got across to the kids, and also discovered what it was they were really passionate about. Because in a remote community like that, at worst, the school can be a Western institution that has no connection to life. And at best, it can be a flourishing community where people see their identity and are really becoming empowered around operating in their own Indigenous and cultural sphere and linguistic sphere as well. But then also being able to connect with some of the changes happening in further afield across Australia or even globally as well. So for me, it was saying, okay, inert knowledge or abstract knowledge, that's important. But the key, the entry point to that is the question now about their own world. Or look at this is really interesting. How does that actually happen? Let's look at some of the scientific principles behind those sorts of, that hook to the lesson. The first 3 minutes of every lesson I found were the key time to really set up for the learning of however long the lesson block was. So that was one of my most profound learnings as a practitioner, I suppose.
I bet. And so just throwing that to Maddie, I guess the teaching the abstract is a mission in science. I mean, whether you're talking about atoms or air pressure, it's just some of this stuff is invisible to kids and really difficult to work with. I mean, what sort of things, Maddie, have you seen that just seems to grab kids' attention and get them to understand that these things really do work?
Yeah, I totally agree with Louka in that the relevance to one's life or one's experience is absolutely key to that deep engagement with science. And the way that this works best is when we can give students an opportunity to see it, to feel it, to hear it, and to really experience that in the classroom through a range of hands-on activities. I think we were studying cell division in Year 11 biology, and being able to give them slides that had the chromosomes splitting and working their magic and the stages of that cell division taking place, that students were able to look and actually see these things happening in onion cells was vital for their understanding. Or when I was teaching observation learning in psychology, and being able to give students the opportunity to experience what that feels like by building balloon animals, just giving, I think that giving them those hands-on experiences really helps to break it down and for them to understand the relevance a little bit better.
Absolutely. I mean, I must say, I've run a half-day workshop once on science of balloons. There's so much you can actually do. I know, we've certainly got a collaboration coming up, which is going to involve some science with balloons too. It's going to be a lot of fun. There's kind of think about what happens in a classroom. There's so many awesome things that have to happen. They don't have to be fantastically explosive, large, and over the top. They can be small and simple. And they do grab kids' attention without a doubt. I mean, speaking of keeping kids' attention, what's the most awesome, okay, I'm not a language guy, but the most funnest thing, what's the best thing that you've seen happen in front of kids? They've gone, you know what, I'd just do that again and again and again and again.
It would have to be something that would make a lot of mess, I think. I can't think of a particular example.
Bring out the slime, eh?
But just, I think it holds us back sometimes from going out and doing something really wild and exciting. Is just, thinking about how much clearing up there's going to be afterwards. But we really need to sort of break through that barrier, because you've got, essentially 30 little hands, or, 60 hands that can help you clean up afterwards as well. Do you have an example, Louka?
Yeah, look, I've got a few. A very simple one, I suppose, from that context was everyone getting in a bus and driving out to a place of spiritual significance, of cultural significance, and then taking that direct experience and bringing all the scientific understandings into it. Because again, even our view of science is from a particular paradigm, and that's something that I learned. A lot of Indigenous communities across Australia have been practicing science just from different perspectives for a very long time. So that's what we would often do, is we'd have that, what's the big catalyst of this entire unit? And usually it was going out in a bus and everyone getting dirty and cooking something or going hunting and then looking at, the time of day or the seasons or the particular biology of this plant, and we'd dig down and pull out, witchetty grub and eat one of them. And I mean, those sorts of experiences, I think they're so memorable and they map so well.
Well, they're fantastic. I mean, I totally agree. Like when we run into a lot the National Indigenous Science Education Program out of Macquarie University. They do a lot of work with the Chifley High School students in Western Sydney, kids up in Casino High School as well. Embedding science and culture together is unreal. And frankly, the elders know so much, and just giving them a forum to speak is outstanding, especially when you're working with kids that's who they respect and want to look up to and listen to. That you might as well tap that knowledge. Absolutely.
You're exactly right.
And actually flipping this, we've all done it. We've all had these lessons that have just gone completely pear-shaped. Really. Is there any time like you've gone, I've got this wicked lesson. It's going to work. We know it's going to work. And turns out, not in the slightest in any way. Think back to the time when you're doing any hands-on workshops, activities or anything with students around science that just, it was a complete clanger and probably shouldn't try that one again.
We were, when I was teaching Year 8 science, we wanted to help the students understand the safety rules that we had in place in the laboratory. And so what we did was we got them to make a horror clip about all of the things that could go wrong in the science lab. We had fake blood everywhere. We had broken glass. There were eyeballs made out of ping pong ball, table tennis balls that had popped out. I remember, we had all of the things in place. Like we had gloves that the kids had to use to pick up the broken glass so that they could actually use it in their film. But there's always the one who doesn't understand the instructions or chooses not to follow them at the time. We had a small incident with a little bit of broken glass encountering someone's skin at one stage, but it was all fine in the end. Yeah. But I remember that being like just the irony of making these safety videos and trying to follow safety procedures in making them, but it not all going to plan.
Well, it's certainly better than just a poster on a wall.
Yeah. And if one kid sacrificed, then at the end of the day,
is it a statistical error or not? No, I get what you mean. Yeah. No, it's a tough thing, and actually safety videos, I mean, you see this happen even with just, it's hard not to jump onto a flight these days and see airlines competing for the best safety video. Yeah. You want to grab attention. Why not? Yeah. I mean, like both your roles at Education Changemakers are stunning. You have to do a lot of cool stuff. And just out of interest, I mean, what's the coolest thing you've been able to do in the time you've been there?
I think for me, it's probably working in Latin America. Obviously, I'm a languages sort of guy. I've got a master's in applied linguistics, and I studied Spanish as an adult at Flinders University. So one of the cool things I get to do in my current role is lead our work in Spanish in Mexico and the Dominican Republic so far. So that's just such a cognitive challenge, let alone anything else. Because, just as we know as teachers, when you're on your feet and you're teaching and trying to inspire and engage and equip, it's emotional labor. It's exhausting work. And then so when I do that in my non-native language, that's even more difficult. But it's incredibly exciting, not least of all because the context there do have their unique qualities to them. And the work is I think, really important. I mean, if there's something that's helpful and it's a process, like the Changemaker journey that we share through our work, that people then take and then use in their schools and that helps them to get somewhere where they're trying to go as a team, that's absolutely brilliant. So it'd be me, flying into Mexico and saying, buenos dias a todos, and taking it from there. It's kind of exciting stuff.
I think for me, we won a grant at the start of this year through the federal government. We're supporting women in STEM and entrepreneurship, and we're developing a Changemaker program specifically for female STEM educators here in Victoria. And I read a horrific statistic that 13% of the students studying STEM subjects at VC level across Australia, which is the sort of Year 12 level across Australia, are women or are girls. So there's a huge gap there, and we reckon that some of our female educators will have some nifty ideas to help bridge that gap. And so I'm really looking forward to. We had over 100 applications for the program, and as a result, have a fantastic group. Sort of narrowed down this brilliant group of really passionate STEM educators who are ultimately going to change the game for the girls that they teach and the women in their communities. So I'm really looking forward to that all kicking off this year.
That's awesome. Like I feel like, when everyone says I'll put it on the back burner, I feel like you've got racks and racks of back burners and different things going on. I mean, that's an awesome initiative, and well done on getting that funding too. I mean, hopefully, and knowing what you guys do, it'll grow beyond your initial cohort too and become a whole nother beast. Is there anything else that's coming up on the horizon? You're going, this is cool. Really can't wait to sink our teeth into it.
Well, I do have to say, and you mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, Summer Howard, who's our Director of Learning Design and Events, is putting together with our team an incredible week of learning. We've been running a conference since 2014, which we've called the EC14, EC15, EC16 conference series. But this year we decided to really step it up and do an entire week. So, and bringing together some really exciting different communities of learners from all across Australia and some international guests as well. So that's happening in September from the 25th of September for the entire week here in Melbourne. And our conference is across 2 of those days, the Wednesday, Thursday. And again, it's pretty inspiring stuff, seeing passionate teachers and leaders come together and share their stories of change and all their failures as well. But of course, as we know as teachers, every failure is a learning opportunity.
I absolutely agree. I just spoke with Adam Selinger from the Children's Discovery Centre, and we're talking about how he actually deliberately rigs his experiments occasionally to fail so that kids can pick it apart. And
that's interesting.
I'm good on you. It takes guts, but you know what? The kids learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. And also gives a sense of what failure is. Because I think when you talk about the actual principles underpinning education, if it's about getting the correct answers, that's only a superficial level that we're aiming for. Really, what we want are kids that can ask great questions and then use whatever methodology they choose, or whatever tool or strategy to try to find out those answers, particularly through the scientific method, of course. But if the questions we're asking in the first place aren't great questions, well, then the answers aren't going to be that inspiring either. So particularly right now, I mean, if you look around the world, there are so many different challenges that this young generation is going to really have to work together to solve. Science education, I can't imagine a more important time for people to be really engaging with it at a deep level.
Yeah, I agree. And then kind of at that sort of thinking, I mean, if you had right now 3 or so brand new teachers arriving from uni about to start their first week in science teaching, what advice would you give them?
I would encourage them to be courageous and to try things that they don't think they're capable of succeeding with, to embrace failure in their classroom, and so to give those big picture ideas or those really challenging projects or scary looking experiments a go, because even if they don't work, that's all part of the scientific method anyway. And it also models learning for your students and for your learners, and sets up an environment where making mistakes is okay, which is, as we've said, absolutely crucial to the learning process itself anyway.
Awesome. Look, thanks so much. And look, I really appreciate your time coming in for this podcast. Absolutely. And look, undoubtedly, there'll be some people who might want to reach out and touch base with you. So, I mean, how can they get in touch?
We'll just probably jump on our website, educationchangemakers.com, and there's a Get in Touch tab there. There's also some of the really exciting work that we're lucky to do around the globe with great people that are teachers and leaders. And we're always looking at, yes, you're quite right, there's lots of back burners currently on the boil. Mm-hmm. And we're also really lucky to have some really great partners like physics, frankly. So checking out that kind of work, and also just being able to take, step out of a school and look at, what is happening across the globe here. What are these really global movements that are trying to transform not just science education, but education as a whole construct? That's kind of exciting stuff. So jump onto the website. We're on Facebook as well, of course, Education Changemakers, and then you can get us on Instagram and Twitter. We're pretty well everywhere.
No worries. Anyway. And we'll put that all in the show notes as well, so people can get a hold of you and harass you as needed. But look, much appreciated, guys. Look, no doubt we'll catch up, and worst case, we'll catch up at the big EC17, the big one down in Melbourne.
Fantastic. Look forward to it, mate. Keep up the great work.
This is the Physics Ed Podcast. We're all about science, ed tech and more. To see 100 fun free experiments you can do with your class, go to physicseducation.com.au. That's physics spelled F-I-Z-Z-I-C-S, and click 100 free experiments.
What a fantastic interview with Maddie and Louka from the Education Changemakers. These guys have worked so hard with teachers and principals and district coordinators and regional managers just to be able to get really just learning in general pumping at their schools, and they really do a fantastic job. Thank you very much for coming along board the Physics Ed podcast. Now, we need to go through our top 3 learnings, and this is critical because there's so much that we can learn from these guys, and one of them is such a small little thing, but gee, it makes a difference. Learning number 1, don't worry about cleaning up. Too often, it's easy to not do the messy experiment. You know, let's be honest. I mean, sometimes you just don't want to have to deal with a headache. You don't want to have to deal with the additional time required to clean up an experiment or two. But you kind of think of it from the student's perspective. They're missing out. They read about these experiments on the web or in a book, or they see it on a TV show and they go, I'd just love to try this out. But they're not allowed to. It's not that often we can think ourselves as teachers that, yeah, they'll just do it at home. But there are plenty of times where I've met students where they're told they're just not allowed to get messy. They can't get their hands messy. They can't get their feet or shoes or shirt or whatever messy for fear of, I'm not even sure what the fear is in some ways. As an alternative, perhaps allow for, it doesn't have to always be messy, but get an experiment where the kids can spend time afterwards cleaning up, because that's actually a learning outcome. And too often we can clean up for kids because, hey, either we can do it or the cleaners can do it or their parents can do it. But I think from a global, the students eventually become adults, and if we teach them to clean up after themselves, this is a good thing. And I'd rather not restrict their learning because of mess. Obviously, within reason, don't do the food colouring on your very good carpet. Do it outside. Yeah, but if you're in a school that just doesn't have outdoor spaces, find a way around this. Can you do this experiment in buckets which have tarps around them? What can you do to make this better for the kids so they can really get their hands messy? Because in some cases, it's their only chance to do it. Learning number 2 for me, and especially came from Louka being a language expert, is try and embed not only language but culture into your classroom. Teaching science, obviously, science has a series of facts, usually proven by a whole bunch of different repeated evidence. There is a scientific method about how we know how the world works. However, depending on where you're from, maybe the narrative that you heard only comes from your particular culture. I've had the privilege of having a chat with a number of Aboriginal elders who know a bucket load about the science of plants, the science of soil, the science of animals. Their astronomy is outstanding. They just use different words and different stories around it, but nonetheless, they know a lot. And we should respect that. And it doesn't have to be your local Indigenous culture. If you're connecting via web conference to an overseas place, it'd be interesting to hear what other people's take on migration patterns or whatever it is that you're teaching around science. It's worth that time, and you'll actually see that science as a human endeavour really looks at this in various curriculums as well. Final thing, and this is by no means the only thing, but certainly I'd like to highlight that point number 3 is take a risk. I know they talked about, Maddie talked about getting people involved with, when you first start out in a science room, that it's worth trying things out and being okay with failure. Kids do learn from you learning from failure too. It's not always have to be perfect, and the more you speak with people around the place, the more you'll hear that some of the best lessons have come from a complete mistake. As long as you plan out the safety factors and allowing for whatever your timing and your lesson outcomes, but take a risk. And it doesn't have to be about what the experiment is. It could be maybe you could present this experiment as a group challenge. Is it a project-based learning thing that you should do over a series of weeks? Is this an individual assessment, or should it be something done as maybe the kids could create a game or an app around whatever it is that you're learning? Have a play with different learning styles and different ways of delivering the same bit of content, and the kids will be better for it.
Thanks for listening to the Physics Ed podcast. Love your science? We do too. Here's this episode's Education Tip of the Week. Grab your pencil and get ready to make some notes.
What I'd like you to try this week, or in the next couple of weeks, is survey your students about what they actually know about science, what they think science actually is about. Get them to get a pen, get them to get a piece of paper, and get them to draw what they think a scientist looks like. And what you might find is that kids will inevitably draw someone in a lab coat. Often, when they draw this person in a lab coat, not always, but often, you'll see them draw it as a man, sadly, and often old, often with crazy wiry hair, doing some crazy experiment with chemicals, and there might be mess and there'll be explosions all around this person, this caricature of a scientist. When you speak with any other scientist or any other reasonably well-educated person, you'll see that is just not the case what happens in real science. Scientists don't just wear lab coats. Scientists aren't just men. Scientists aren't just old. They don't just do chemical explosions all the time. They work in every industry, from materials science, like designing different plastics and polymers, through to working in biology and working out fish populations to help support local fisheries, through to astronomy or mining or whatever. There's so many industries that are supported by scientists, and they just aren't the classic mad scientist view that is portrayed over and over again. So there's a challenge. Let's get the kids to spend some time to write down what they think a scientist does and what they look like, and then have a class discussion. Really delve deep into this, and you might be surprised what they might come up with. And I'd encourage you to go onto the Physics Education website, because you'll find an article where we wrote about kids' misconceptions on the way science actually works. So go into Physics Education, again spelled really badly, FIZZICS education.com.au, and just type in kids perceptions. When you type in kids perceptions, you will find an article which goes through a whole bunch of different things that kids have generally said to us during our time teaching science to hundreds and hundreds of schools and thousands and thousands of students over the years. Everything from astronomy misconceptions through to chemistry misconceptions, colour and vision, electricity, energy, forces, you name it, it's there. You'd be surprised what kids actually think when they're coming into your classroom. It's really worth working these things out prior to you teaching a particular lesson topic.
This is the Physics Ed Podcast. We're excited about science. Grab a copy of our new book, Be Amazing, How to Teach Science the Way Primary Kids Love, from our website. Just search Be Amazing Book. It's available in hard copy and ebook. Go to physicseducation.com.au. That's physics spelled FIZZICS.
Going beyond what kids think science is and what scientists look like, it's also important to think about how the kids can work as learners in your classroom. Just how are you facilitating this, or are you the lecturer up front? So I thought you might like to listen to a small excerpt from an interview we did previously with Isabel Kingsley, who's from the Museum of Applied Arts and Sciences from Sydney. She had a really interesting take about how she thinks teachers could be within a classroom, not so much as the giver of all knowledge, but more of a facilitator. Take a listen.
When I started teaching, I thought, well, I'm supposed to know all the answers. Then I'm supposed to teach this knowledge that I have into these empty vessels that don't have the knowledge. Now I have a completely different view of education. And it's not about that at all. It's about co-learning, being part of the learning process along with the students. You don't have to know the answer. You don't have all the knowledge. They have sometimes more knowledge than we do on some things. So it's about facilitating an experience and coaching them or teaching them how to learn rather than teaching them stuff they should know. And just going on that with them, I think, is really important.
Isn't that great? I mean, what Isabel has to say is, I hear a lot from a lot of teachers in professional development programs that it really is about kids learning how to learn. It's not these days just about us sprouting facts to them and giving them a series of chapter readings and here's the answers at the end. Nowadays, I'm finding many teachers are very much concerned about teaching kids how to learn and how to evaluate facts they've found in textbooks and websites. So critical. Now, if you want to hear a bit more about that, check out the interview we did with Isabel Kingsley in a previous episode. Just go onto the Physics Ed podcast and check it out.
Thanks for listening to the Physics Ed Podcast. Sign up now for our fortnightly email newsletter. It's loaded with details on new experiments you can do, STEM teaching articles, new gadgets, exclusive offers and upcoming events. Go to physicseducation.com.au. Scroll to the bottom and add your email.
So that just about wraps up yet another episode of the Physics Ed podcast. Look, I'd really encourage you to jump on our website and check out all the blogs and articles, the free science experiments. There's a lot of stuff that's freely available and will help you in your classroom. Don't forget to put a rating if you can, please, on iTunes. It certainly helps us out, and will also help other teachers to discover that this podcast exists and people can learn about how to teach science further in classrooms and beyond. Next week, you'll meet Vanessa Barrett from the Australian Botanic Garden in Mount Annan in southwestern Sydney. There we'll talk about, creating, science festivals and so much more. And look, as always, may your science lessons be fun, make them informative, and please grab your students' imagination. My name's Ben Newsom from Physics Education, and you've been listening to the Physics Ed podcast.
You've been listening to another Physics Ed podcast. We're excited about science. Subscribe to us on iTunes to download the next episode as soon as it's released. And don't forget, for hundreds of ideas, free experiments, our new Be Amazing book and more, go to physicseducation.com.au.